Good day, everyone. Welcome to another learning experience with me, your reporter, Robert L. Busile Jr., focusing on the topic, the ways reporters learn to report and editors learn to edit. This morning, we will try to discover how reporters have gained their profession at the same time how editors learn their craft. Let's proceed. There are three primary realms in how reporters learn to report and are socialized into their profession. First, we have their practice, or the actual act of doing journalism, reporting, and editing. Next is the reinforcement of a professional identity, wherein by being a reporter, they have to incorporate a professional stance, role, position, and worldview as they engage in news practice. And lastly, we have the loci of learning, wherein they are educated within and outside the newsroom. Now, we proceed with the primary skills that reporters and editors or journalists should have. First, of course, is the reporting or the news gathering that involves asking questions and interviewing sources. We have also the news writing that has its specific rhetorical demands, primarily the attribution of information and appropriate order of information, of course. There is what we call the news hierarchy, or how we structure and write our news. We also have the editing that ranges from technical requirements such as the grammar, the headline enjambment, and the local style to the content itself. Of course, we also have interviewing, wherein we ask our sources relevant questions using various media such as phone books, trademark guides, the penal code, the internet, and relevant study guides. All of these are motivated by judgments about balance and objectivity that is being accurate and at the same time not too personal. The other journalistic competencies that we have to learn and know about being a reporter includes number one, maintaining credibility. That is the goal that is referred to in relation to appropriate practice. We have to have credibility. The accuracy of information and language, the balance of position in both reporting and text writing, and at the same time, getting on the other side. That is, trying to see both sides of the story. Is this what really happened? What is the victim's point of view? What is the suspect's point of view? Or what are the other sides that we have to consider? Next, we also have to learn about the roles, relationships, and hierarchies present in the news community, as well as the professional role we must have as reporters with respect to the community of coverage. We will learn later on the roles and relationships as well as the hierarchies as we proceed further. Aside from the primary skills, we also have to learn about the competences and the interactional skills that reporters need to have. First is talking and responding like a journalist. That means being professional in the way we talk, be mindful of the tone of our voice and the language that we use. Next is to keep in mind of keeping our opinions to ourselves and to learn how to use neutral response cues. Whatever the interviewees have to share, we have to keep our opinions for ourselves. Next is to ask the appropriate set of questions using the appropriate language to various communities of coverage, whether they are cops, whether we are in the court, business, education, and whatnot. Next, we have to understand the communicative norms, interactional styles, roles, values, actors, and jargons present in the area that we are covering, such as in education. Of course, in education, we have the teachers, the principals, and the students, and the rest of the community of coverage. Next is to respect gatekeepers and their competence and knowledge. Of course, gatekeepers pertains to the people who share the information of an organization, of a product, and other areas of communities. And so we have to respect that they have boundaries regarding the information that they could share. Now that we have learned the journalist's way of speaking, skills, and competencies, we proceed with how they socialize into the news culture. Socialization into the news culture means we understand how to place the skills we have learned in a context and to employ these skills in the daily practice of news writing, news gathering, editing, and interviewing. Next, we also have to understand that there are interactions happening between the less experienced and the more experienced reporters and editors in the structuring of knowledge, emotion, and social action. Next, we have to understand that in the newsroom, there are certain practices, act sequences, participant roles, values, and norms, and we have to understand the ideologies and the rationale or the explanation behind these practices, values, roles, sequences, and norms. But then, we learn how to become personally distinct and to set boundaries when to compromise to these practices and when to say no and stop so that we can still be distinct, be professional of ourselves in the newsroom. Next, we need to understand that in socializing into the news culture, there are languages that we have to consider. First is the prescriptive language or the technical, the formal language that we have to use in writing news, and the functional one, that is the language that is based on the media that we are using, whether spoken, written, visual, oral, and interactional dimensions. And of course, we have to be accurate with the facts and the usage of the language we use in all media domains. Next, we proceed with the news process. This involves news gathering, reporting, writing, editing, and publication. And so we have to understand that in the news process, there are story components or what the story comprises. So this involves the news writing, the news tip, the sources, the news values, editing, the headline, and the story placement. At the same time, there is what we call discourse level features, telling a story, narrative structure, integration of cultural schemas. At the same time, topic selection, multiple authors and their roles, internalized assumptions, coherence, local norms, information hierarchy, conventionalization, routine, and salience in physical domain. And so the news process starts from the reporters who gather the news and write about it and report about it. Then that report, written and reported by the reporter, proceeds to the section editor who checks about the news made by the reporter for the grammar and how it can be placed in the publication before proceeding to the copy editor who checks it more thoroughly at the same time who manages or thinks about how it can be published in the article. And so the news process can be summarized in 3 points. It is the triumvirate of the facts that is gathered, how it is structured or written, at the same time, how it is placed in the page. So it is a triumvirate of facts, story, and page. The news process also has three participants: the principals, the authors, and the animators. The principals pertains to the sources of information, so they are the interviewees, and the authors are the ones who gather this information from the sources and who writes about them, and the animators are how the people structure the news. So basically, principals are the sources, and the authors and animators pertains to the reporters and sometimes the editors. Next, we have to understand the various roles and relationships present in the newsroom. First, we have the roles in the newsroom, which are the reporters, the editors, and the photographers. There are various kinds of editors performing various functions. To make it more localized, in the University Voice, we have the literary editor who is in charge of editing the literary pieces submitted by the literary writers, the feature editors who is in charge of editing and checking the feature articles, and the news editor who is in charge of editing the news articles before proceeding to the assistant and the editor-in-chief who checks the other structures of the news. We also have the photographers or the layout artists and the illustrators. Aside from that, there are relationships present in the newsroom between the reporter and the editor, reporter to reporter, and the reporter to the source, or the editor and reporter to the coverage of community. So here we see the various complexity of relationships existing in the newsroom. At the same time, these roles and relationships need to have balance between authority and connection. At the same time, this is seen in various news media. If you have seen, the GMA News says they have been reporting for the Filipino people, that is how they connect, for 75 years. That is their authority. So they balance the authority and connection to the people and amongst themselves. At the same time, there are values that makes journalists distinct from others. They have to keep boundaries and firewalls between commercial and journalistic strands of news writing. Is this news telling a newsworthy story, or is it just for commercial sake? At the same time, they have to maintain objectivity and avoid conflict of interest. Of course, we have to consider that there are also differences in reporting and writing. And primarily, reporting is given value because reporting involves news gathering, at the same time telling the news that we have gathered in a way that is structured professionally and in a journalistic sense. At the same time, there is the content and style editing and the prioritization of local news, since when local news are reported, they are more relevant to the persons who are hearing them. At the same time, there are general rules that we have to adhere to when being a reporter. First, we should not editorialize, or we should not add our personal opinion to the facts, to the information that we have gathered. And at the same time, on the very first page of our news published articles, there should be no ads. That is, starting on the first point, how we keep commercial and journalistic strands apart from each other. Now we will discover the loci of learning, or how they learn their craft. First, of course, they have to attend journalistic schools. And so we have AUP offering development communication, and we have other schools offering mass media communication. Another institutional sites where they learn is the newsroom. Their on-the-job training, at the same time the practices in the newsroom, is a site of learning. At the same time, the publications, the organizations, and the conferences they attend or they join will be a place where they learn their craft and profession. At the same time, they have the workbooks and textbooks where they could refer to when they are news writing and editing. At the same time, they learn the fundamental nuances and esoteric skills such as writing backhand or writing opposite to themselves. Of course, we have the apprentice model wherein, as we have discussed earlier, the more experienced reporters mentor the less experienced one. And so to sum up our discussions, we have learned this morning the news process, the skills, the news writing, editing, reporting, and interviewing, competencies, values, and relationships in the newsroom. At the same time, how we socialize into the news culture, which is very complex process, internalizing a set of assumptions of practice and professional identity. At the same time, how reporters learn their craft in journalistic school, in the newsroom, and publications, organizations, and conferences. And so, to end our discussion this morning, let me leave to you Martin Luther's words. If you want to change the world, pick up your pen and write. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that we have learned how reporters learn to report and how editors learn to edit. Thank you so much, and see you on our next videos.